It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. I am Craig Hoffman. That is Logan Paulsen. I host the Hoffman Show 3 to 6 each and every weekday on the Team 980. Logan, contributor to that show and co-host with me on Countdown to Kickoff after he played 10 years in the NFL, including 6 for the Washington Commanders. Logan, today we dive into the film of The Tie. Bum, bum, bum. The Tie. 20-20, Commanders and Giants, obviously, on Sunday. By the way, the game in a couple of weeks on Sunday Night Football, so get ready to see each other for an afternoon edition of Countdown to Kickoff. I don't know. I think our typical morning bagel spot will be closed by then. I don't even
I
think
know.
we
It's a
can
good
get
big. I
lunch.
really look forward to that. That's probably my biggest disappointment about being in the
I mean, with the
evening.
bye week and Sunday Night Football, we got 2 weeks with no bagels.
2 weeks no bagels. It's a tough deal.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Move it back, NFL. We need our bagels. But anyway, apropos of none of that, let's dive into the game and then maybe zoom out a little bit, scope out a little bit, and talk about what you would do as like approaching a self scout, and then we can get into more detail on that maybe on Friday because it's such a weird time for a bye. Like teams often do massive self scouts on like week 7, week 8, and it's helpful because the second half of your season can be changed by that. But here, with it by being in week 14, like there's only so much you can do over the last 4 weeks, and also especially from a personnel standpoint, being this far post trade deadline, there's not a whole lot you can do besides tweak a little bit because you already know so much about your team, and you only have 4 games to go. So we'll save that though for the end of the podcast. Now that I've set Logan up, I see the wheels turning in his head, but we're going to save that discussion for the end. All right, offensively, Heinicke throws for 275, 2 touchdowns. That's all great. But how did he actually play on Sunday? Because it feels like a lot of people. Like I will say this, it feels fan base reaction like they lost. Like the commentary is very critical. The go back to Carson crowd is being very loud. There's a lot of people that are upset, and I kind of don't feel like that's warranted after watching it, but I don't know. When you watch the tape, where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, that is surprising that it's so boisterous, especially after the stat line that he posted. I know that quarterback play is not just related to stats, and I think when you look at it, one of my big criticisms, and it's every week is a criticism, but this week especially, is the turnover-worthy plays were very high this week. I think he had 5. I want to say 4 or 5, and they were all kind of very fortuitous, not to be picks. But I think if you're going to look at that stuff, you also got to look at this. And he had some. The other thing he did, which was a little frustrating, was he misses Logan Thomas in the red zone on the first drive or the second drive. That would have been an easy touchdown for Logan Thomas. Great play design, wide open. Very, very frustrating. He misses Jahan in a red zone situation that would have been a touchdown. But again, the pocket's kind of fallen down around him, those types of things. So I understand the criticisms. There is holes in his game, but I expect to see holes in his games. And I think if you look at some of the stuff that he does to elevate this team, I think you kind of say, well, I get why he's still starting, right? I understand why he's still starting. And I look at just as a perfect example of the touchdown to Terry in the first quarter. He does an excellent job. Lucas kind of gives up not a messy win, but a quick pressure. He does an excellent job stepping up. Kind of an off-platform throw, flicks it over the Dexter Lawrence's head. Terry makes an excellent catch, obviously, but that is a play that was not existent with Carson.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's the play late in the game, the 4th and 4, which I think everybody's been talking about. I think he actually misses his first read. I think the ball should go to Terry. Terry's open. Ball should be out. But, if you're going to make a mistake like this. Roll to your left, kind of rolling away from the rotation of your arm. Excellent throw to Curtis, who on the scramble drill gets open. That kind of stuff. He had another miss to Jahan, but I think that, again, is pressure related. So I just look at that and I say, man, like he did a lot of good things. And I think another criticism I hear is that, he took a lot of sacks. And I think he was responsible in some situations for inviting pressure. But also I think Wink Martindale, this should be a whole segment, Craig, so we can save the deep dive on this for later in the pod. But Wink Martindale did an excellent job of scheming up pressures and finding excellent matchups. Like that was the thing that jumps off the screen when you watch the tape.
Well,
You
let's
just
just go into it now because I mean it
okay.
affects the entire offensive breakdown of
Yeah.
like what were they facing, and also obviously we'll spend some time over the next 2 weeks like talking about how they can create a better protection package moving forward. But it was pretty clear that they struggled with some of that stuff, and including in key situations like the sack they give up to Thibodeau in the
Yeah.
last drive they have of the game, like absolutely murders them. And so yes, Taylor deserves credit for avoiding a lot. I mean, the number of times as I'm watching the game back and you see like, oh wow, he got drilled on that
Yeah.
play. He took a ton of hits, a ton of hits. So even though it really should be looked at as he only took 5 sacks, not
Right.
wow, he took 5 sacks. Like the number of times he gets the ball out right before he's getting waylaid is immense in this game. And so what I guess it's on Martindale, and then is that how much of that is an indictment of the plan that Washington had to try to protect their quarterback?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So let's just talk about it. Let's talk about that sack, the Kayvon Thibodeau sack at the end of the game. And it would be easier if we had like a whiteboard or a demo screen. So you guys have to use your mind's eye and listen to this. I'm going to do a breakdown for this for Command Center, and then on my Instagram I'll try to get that up on Wednesday or Thursday. So this will kind of be talked about there. So basically, what you're having is they get an empty, and so as we talked about in the pregame show, there's two ways to handle pressure, right? One is to get an empty, spread everybody out, designate the known rushers, and get your protection called correctly based on that, because the structure of the defense becomes very, very clear, right? The other way is to go max protection. In this case, in the Kayvon Thibodeau sack, there is a back in the backfield, but to me, it's a 5-man protection. It's an empty protection because the back's free releasing. So this is really cool. This is like some really detailed football stuff. They take Gibson from the offensive left, motion him to the backfield. Number 44, the defensive safety for the Giants, tracks him into the box. You can tell he starts communicating with the nickel and the other linebacker in the box, and they exchange responsibilities. So Gibson lines up on the offensive right. The defense comes out of this little powwow, and 53 is on the defensive left, offensive right, matching Gibson now. So all of a sudden, basically what they've done is they've changed who's blitzing. So the safety 44 and the nickel are lined up to the offensive left. Okay. And basically 53 is a big, 51 is a big, 97 is a big. Those are defensive linemen. They're all to the offensive right. So in this 5-man protection, you are going to send your center, your slide, to the offensive right. So you're going to have 3 guys for 3, and you're going to have 2 for 2 on the backside in a man protection look. You call that the man side, is the left side here. Wink Martindale did an excellent job of dictating the direction of the slide here, saying, I know you're going to slide to the right, and I know how to overload your pressure to the left, because you're 2-on-3 essentially in this look. So our protection rules for the Commanders are, if you get a squeeze, if you get an interior pressure, right? If there's a blitz in the A gap, right? And there's a defensive tackle inside of the tackle has to squeeze it. So Wink Martindale brings the nickel and the safety in the A and B gap. Charles Leno has to squeeze that. That is the rule of the protection. That is the rule of the protection. 5, Kayvon Thibodeau is unblocked in this protection by rule. And people say, why are you not blocking a defensive end? That's stupid. I would much rather not block a defensive end than someone running directly at my quarterback in the A gap. It just gives you a beat of time, right? So in this look, he is taking a 2-man protection, and he's breaking the rules by saying, you squeeze versus A gap pressure, well, squeeze this, I'm going to have the end come off the edge. And he did that multiple times. So he's dictating the side of the slide, he's dictating the direction the center's going, and he's overloading your man protection side and letting Kayvon Thibodeau run free off the edge. He did
Yeah,
an excellent job of that all day.
I'm watching it now on the all 22, and I mean it's pretty stunning to watch because they have enough to block it. It's 5
Mhm.
on 5, except for they don't because the guys go the quote unquote wrong way. The question is then like if they got that multiple times in the game, how did they not adjust, and what would the adjustment be? And is that the kind of thing you can do in the middle of a game? Is that the kind of thing you can adjust to? Because man, hey, this is our last chance to win the football game. Also, if we give up a safety, we lose the football game.
Mhm.
Is a real bad time to get exploited by something that's been happening all game. But that's easy for me to say sitting here talking to a microphone.
And so it wasn't the same blitz every single time, but it was the same theory of blitz, right? Dictate the slide, overload the man side. And, in this look, it's a nickel and a safety in the A and B gap here. But there was another time where it's a 3 technique and they blitz the middle linebacker. You got to squeeze that. Kayvon Thibodeau comes free, right? There's another look where they overload the slide to the right and they pinch the defensive end and they blitz the A gap and the nickel back comes off. So they just took that same principle and did it over and over and over again from different things. On this look specifically, to me, this is one of those ones where a veteran quarterback gets you in a better situation. A guy who knows what's going on. When they come out of that powwow and 44 no longer matches the back, I know, and 53, the defensive end goes to the side of the back. I know that he is now blitzing because he would match the side of the back. Because what if in this look, Gibson's to the right, 44 is to the left. If Gibson were to free release, that would be a touchdown, right? Because no one's going to match Gibson. So who's matching Gibson? It has to be 53. I know 53 is not rushing. There's 2 defensive players to that side, defensive linemen. There's 3 defensive players to the left. I need to come up and be like, hey, guys, let's work the slide to the left and then go back and do my cadence. Now, is that challenging? Yes. Is that something that in terms of mechanics, do they have built in? I have no idea. But the way to stop this pressure is to send the slide the other way. And to me, the center can't necessarily see that, but you bring the motion in, the quarterback should be able to identify and discern that and get the protection called the right way.
That is fascinating. That is something you're not getting on another podcast. That is why you listen to Take Command. That is why you subscribe to Take Command. So if you are listening right now and you are not subscribed, go hit the button and you will get more insight like this on a regular basis. That So the other part of that is Nick Martin is the center here.
Yeah.
How much did Larson going out affect that? And then how much did like how much do they need to hope that either Sam Cosmi or Trey Turner is available to play right guard so that Schweitzer can kick inside the center room? Would that help things?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is I don't know. Like in this look specifically, I think it's hard for the center to see this because think about the center doesn't see the motion. He doesn't see who's coming in with the motion. He doesn't get that benefit that the quarterback does. So
Well,
I
just
think
just to pause for 1 second though, because in this offense, the way I understand it, you would know
yeah,
better than me, but like doesn't the center make most of those calls?
he does. He does. That is true. And that's I talked to someone today in the building. And I was like, could if the quarterback wanted to, could he switch this? And he said, if he wants to, he can. So obviously that's not how they do it normally, but there is that capability, according to this individual I talked to. Now he might have just been saying something to say something, but that not having the quarterback have that ability seems asinine to me. So I
Right.
trust that he has some level of flexibility. And if you watch the film closely, there's a couple times where Taylor is doing something. I don't know if he's changing protection or alerting hot, but he's directing some type of pre-step traffic.
Right.
So I would imagine there's an element of that. So on this look, I don't think Nick does anything incorrect. There are 4 bigs, there are 4 defensive linemen to the right of the center. I also think they're sliding to number 97, who's their best interior pass rusher, to get double teams on him, right? Because that's what you get with the slide. It's the same thing you do with Aaron Donald. When you have an elite interior defensive player, that's one of the benefits, right? That's a benefit. So those are some factors that dictate the slide. I think everything I see on this play seems like it's right. The problem is I think we can talk about the other solution in terms of max protecting in a second. The problem is Wink was just able to do this very, very consistently. And it's crazy because the protection plan actually works really well. Like there's a play earlier in the game where Terry's running like a big speed out, right? And they bring a zone pressure. So the defensive end drops underneath it. And they do the same thing. Wink does the same thing. They overload the man side. But because the defensive end is running from so far away, Taylor's actually able to work through his whole progression. He gets hit, but the ball needs to be out quick. You need to know you're hot there. That's on Taylor a little bit, but the theory, the practice of it works really well. It's just about can you eliminate that moving forward because it is catastrophic. If Wink Martindale is able to constantly overload your man side and your protection, like you can't pass protect. You're going to have a game like this where you give up 5 sacks.
So you said a more veteran quarterback would potentially be able to see this. There's always the thought that you're going to give up more sacks with Wentz than Heinicke. How much, how much further damage did Taylor afford to the point that that would actually hold up, or is against this defense is it actually reversed because of the knowledge that Carson has and the amount of time he's spent in the league?
And so I will say this, like Wink deserves a ton of credit, and it's really
Yeah.
easy. And it's really easy with the clicker in my hand to be like, "Man, Taylor should have done this. This seems really obvious." But in real time with real bullets, hard to check. And also, Wink is really good at like kind of he plans pressures for protections. He doesn't do it the other way around. He doesn't just throw pressures and hope it beats protections. He's coaching up his pressures to beat your protections. And people say, "How do you know that?" It's like just watching him in this game, you can tell. Like understanding this team's protection, you can tell that he studied it and he knows where the holes are. So I think that's one of the advantages of having the bye week this week, I think, is because now you say, okay, well, this is Wink's plan last week. How do we shore this up? Can we leave a back in maybe? Can we dictate the slide in a different way? Because there's a couple times where I think just on default the slide should go the other way, right? But because of whatever their rule is, they're going to the three big guys. They're going to 97. Whatever the rule that dictated their slide was this week, Wink was able to exploit it. So how do we keep him out of that? How do we keep ourselves out of that situation? Staying on schedule with the run game is one. Being more efficient on first, second down is like an easy one because he doesn't do that as much in third and like sub 4 situations. It quiets down a little bit. So that was something I think maybe you look at if you're the coach. But back to your question, like I think this is also good beta for Taylor to say, okay, I recognize some of these pressures, I recognize some of these looks. And the problem is that like when you're playing a guy like Wink, is he knows that. So you might flip the protection next week and the three big guys rush and they play a zone drop out of it. And it doesn't matter if the back's free, it doesn't matter how they match the back, and you get a defensive end hitting you in the air from the other side. So that's the problem of playing a guy like Wink because he's always seemingly one step ahead from a protection standpoint. But the good thing is he doesn't have a full kind of mini bye week because they played on Thanksgiving to kind of prep for you the same way. He's got to prep for Philly, and he's got to get back to you. So how much new stuff is he going to be able to put in?
Right, and especially when you have the full 2 weeks to be able to come up. Obviously, we know Scott Turner's been at his best this season when he has extra time to prepare as well, and it's not like they played terrible offensively. They did throw
No,
up 20 points and put together a couple of really nice drives. Taylor, was able to get Terry McLaurin one of his, or get Terry McLaurin over 100 yards. John Dotson was more involved than he'd been in a long time. Curtis Samuel gets some of his touches. I wanna stop down on Samuel for a second because
mm,
to me, he's the guy who's the bellwether for the offense. He's our old canary in the coal mine, right?
it's true. Yeah.
And when he gets going, this offense is at its best. What can they do to one, is it smart to get him more involved earlier? And if so, two, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like now there's like two canaries in the coal mine, so to speak. I think Jahan is another one. I think they kind of cannibalize each other's touches. And I think this week they were like, let's see if we can get Jahan more involved. Like on the first play action pass that he catches, I think it's like the first or second play of the game. Terry's running like a deep post, clearing coverage out off of a play action look, and Jahan's running the high cross, and it's wide open. He's able to make a catch. So obviously that was part of the focus. Like, can we get him in one-on-one situations? Even his touchdown. I don't know if they knew they were going to play two man, but basically like working the high low on the corner and the out to him over the ball in a man-to-man situation is pretty good, right? So putting him in situations where he can get those touches, where he can make those plays, I thought was pretty good. Again, I think it was like the second or third catch of the game for him. They're running a play action pass and he's running a hitch on the outside. Like,
Is that the one he
obviously,
catches on his butt?
yeah, they were
Yeah.
making a really big concerted effort to get him more touches. So I think it's either him or Curtis, right? I know that's kind of it shouldn't be either or, but right now with how few passes that they're calling,
Right.
I think it is. So I think the fact that Jahan got some touches is excellent, and I think that Curtis gets some touches late in the game, I think is also very important, right? Because it speaks to his skill set, and they're able to get him some touches in the run game. And again, he's not the best route runner. I think like that's a misconception that I have about him. He's just a good route runner. He's explosive. He's fast. He's quick, but he's much better like catching a short pass and like breaking it for a big gain. Jahan is the one who's like better deep stuff. So maybe now that they're both healthy, Scott finding ways to speak to both guys, I think is maybe something that they're looking at.
Yeah, I would love to see him get touches, obviously in the run game, as part of like I think they've done a pretty good job of that over the last 8 weeks, getting him 3 to 5 carries a game. They've stopped having these games where he just doesn't touch it at all. But I do think getting him involved as a wide receiver on some of the quick stuff, right? Like it puts more on the defense's plate. Like he is the ultimate weapon. He is the
Yeah,
guy who's gonna move around, who's gonna dictate a lot of coverage, who is gonna mess with the rules because you don't know exactly what to treat him as. You have to be aware of where he is on every single play because he could wind up running an end around, running a reverse. He could wind up running a quick slant, a quick out, or he could wind up going deep. And that's a really hard guy to account for. And so the sooner they establish, yeah, he could do as many of those things as possible, I think is good for them. And he's also a matchup nightmare. And I think that was the thing that was frustrating for me, especially late in that game. Some of the calls that they make is they started to really just figure out, where's 38, who was the practice squad corner that the Giants
Yeah.
elevated on Sunday, and just go, where is he? He's on Curtis. Get Curtis the ball. Where
Mm.
is he? On Jahan. Get Jahan the ball. And that kind of stuff was available to them. It felt like all day when they really wanted it. And so it mixes in with the pressures and the ability to actually protect long enough to get the ball out. You obviously don't want to stray too far from your identity, but it just feels like they never quite found that right balance
Yeah.
on Sunday. But they were effective in stretches, which obviously gets them to the 20 points. But it just they never quite found it. And I feel like that has been like an ongoing season long thing to find the right balance of maximizing these very potent weapons that they have and this running game, which wants to be at the core of what they do.
What's interesting, I felt like this was the first week that they even tried to? Is
Yeah.
that yeah, like,
Yeah.
even, like,
Because
gave it
they've
a
just
shot?
been like, screw the passing game. I mean,
Yeah.
Ron had a great quote yesterday where he was asked, basically that, like, how do you balance it? And he's like, yeah, I don't really agree with your question. We're going to pass it when we have to. I was like, oh,
Mm.
you're going there. And that's in 2022 to hear a head coach just flat out say that and not even play the game of like, well, we're trying this, that. He's like, no, we're going to run the football and we're going to pass it when we have to.
Right.
We're only going to pass as much as we have to. It I think it's the right way to play for this team. It
Yeah.
also is completely unsustainable long term because they've invested so much in the wide receiver position. It is a stupid way for this team to play long term and the absolute smartest way for them to play right now. But it's hard because, like, against a team like the Giants, where there's so much opportunity based off personnel on the back end, and we'll see in 2 weeks if Adoree Jackson is back, and that obviously
Yeah.
changes the equation. Julian Love being back obviously changed the equation for them. He had a really good game defensively for New York. But it is the kind of thing that just it is a wild, like, 2 one-way streets going in the exact opposite directions, and trying to pick which one to turn down is a tough job if you're Scott Turner. I don't envy him in that way.
Yeah, and I think, that statement sounds kind of crazy, but I also think that they've done a good job of getting to the play action pass game. And when you talk to Ron, like, I had a conversation with him today, he was basically saying, like, that's a big part of who we want to be, and it does affect defenses negatively. But he's like, you kind of have to earn that. And I don't know if analytics supports that. That's more of a traditional
It
football
absolutely doesn't.
type of thing, but, like, that's where he's coming from. So I understand you're gonna run the football, build your play action, and quite frankly, it's helped Taylor Heinicke. Like, it's helped the offensive line, it's helped Taylor Heinicke. Look at all the sacks that they had, look at all the pressure they had. Those are in drop back passing situations, those are in drop back pass protections. That is not where this team wants to live. So as much as people want to say, like, that comment is an indictment of Heinicke, I think it's just as much an indictment of the offensive line. Not because they don't have good players, it's just that they're not good at drop back passes. So let's get in the play pass stuff. Let's live where we want to live, which is play pass, run game, move the pocket, be conservative. And then what I would say, to your point, Craig, is can from that package, which I think they can do this,
Yeah.
develop more of a potent passing attack in the confines of that parameter, right? Like,
Yes, 100%.
can you delve deeper into the play action pass stuff? Can you work some keeper stuff? Can you work some side adjust in the run game that work like a run, in terms of Kyle does this like a quick off coverage, you run a little slant, throw the ball there.
Yeah.
Like, that plays like a run, but you're getting Curtis Samuel a touch in space, or Terry or Jahan or Logan Thomas even, right? So that would be my kind of perspective on that. Yes, I agree with your sentiment. I think you worded it very nicely. Like, this is how they have to play now for a myriad of reasons, right? And they have to play now because it also elevates the defense. It's another reason. But can
Yes.
you take these parameters that you've set and build off of it? And I think you absolutely can. I think you can absolutely build off of it.
Yeah. So, like, for instance, if you run a boot, and everyone's seen this throw or this concept a million times in the NFL, you have your three-level routes that go with the quarterback, and very typically, that first guy is gonna get the ball. Easy little dump off, off the boot action. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult throw against pressure, but that guy gets the ball some absurd percentage of the time. Like, yeah, sometimes you hit the deep one, sometimes you get the middle guy, but often it's just that quick dump off, first guy across. And often it's a tight end. Well, what if it's Curtis Samuel instead? And like those
Right.
little tweaks can get these guys touches. It doesn't have to be drop back pass. It doesn't have to be anything fancy.
Crazy. Yeah.
One thing that is kind of, a limitation to defend Scott and Ron and this thing here is Taylor's arm strength, right?
Yeah.
If you're Aaron Rodgers and
Or
you
even Daniel
see
Jones. Even
or
Daniel.
Daniel
Look at
Jones,
what
right?
look what he's able to do in an offense that's very similar contextually to what the
Right.
Commanders are.
So one of the things that like I picked Rodgers because he does this, I think, more than anybody, especially when he used to have Devontae, is run play called. They're playing off coverage. Rather than try to run the ball into even a neutral box, I'm just gonna rise up and sling it as hard as I can out to the sideline and let Devontae Adams catch and run for 8 yards. And sometimes those guys break it and it's a big play, but even if you get 6 yards, like if you got 6 yards by handing it off, you'd have been thrilled. So take the 6 yards. That ball is gonna take so much longer by, again, is it
Yeah.
real time? Like, it's point 0.1 seconds difference. In the NFL, that is a massive deal and puts the ball at risk of being picked potentially even if Taylor tries to rise up and sidearm sling that ball out to Terry McLaurin, out to Curtis Samuel, out to Jahan Dotson. Could you run like a bubble RPO type of stuff? Yeah, and we haven't seen that a ton this year, but occasionally.
They just
But some
haven't
of
been
that
good
stuff
at it,
that's
really.
so yeah, some of that stuff that's on the table for a Mahomes, for a Rodgers, for some of these elite throwers is just not on the table for them. And that's kind of the hard thing in the long term is finding someone who can quickly get the ball to the playmakers, which is the idea with Wentz.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's just actually not really who he is, despite the fact that when his base is right and he can step into it, he's got, one of the 5 strongest arms in the league.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's interesting, like coaching high school football, like you're like, oh, let's just run these bubbles. And like if they're not going to cover it, because in high school football, everyone's running the football. So there, you see heavy boxes, all this stuff. And if there's a bubble route, like just throw the ball to the bubble. The problem is the quarterback's arm is not very strong. So it takes forever to get the ball out there and they can rally and make the tackle. I think you run into a very similar kind of like you articulated, a very similar situation with Taylor Heinicke. But I do think there are ways. I think if you look at, we're going to talk about the defense here in a second, but look at
Yeah.
what the Giants did, right? They did a really nice job of kind of saying, we're going to run keepers, we're going to run a wrinkle off the keeper, and we're going to find ways to get Darius Slayton touches on like a little flat route. And then when we have to run a play action pass shot, we're going to take it. And we got to talk about that a little bit too, because there was some open, really, really open play action passes shots where he has to scramble or the pressure's there. He takes a sack, whatever it is. We'll talk about that more later. But I think the Giants did a really nice job. Kafka did a really nice job of kind of molding the offense to find these to elevate the passing game while staying true to their identity. And I think Scott is doing that. Like when you watch him each week, there's more wrinkles there. And I feel like in some ways the parameter that Ron has set for him has made him a better offensive coordinator. Because instead of
Mm.
saying we can do everything, which they
Yeah.
can, it said, nope, we're going to focus on this, build off of this. And it's made him better in terms of dealing with going against kind of convention in terms of how he's calling plays. And I think that's been really interesting to see, and a really cool thing for like young play callers, offensive coordinators, good offenses. Because if you look around the league, good offenses, they have a very strong identity. Now that identity can be very broad, but it's very kind of there's a specific element. Oh, we're going to be a play action pass team. Well, how do you do that? And what do you build that from? And I think that's what Ron's done by saying, hey, run the football. Now you build around that rule, and I think that's been kind of cool.
Yeah, less is more in a way. The one thing I'll say about Jones, we'll obviously get to this, but when that dude wants to take a shot,
Oh,
it's out.
whoo,
Well,
he's got a
he's
gun.
got a cannon.
Yeah,
2, he has no hesitation. He's like, "Oh, we got the shot play on. Oh, I got like my matchup. Let it rip." I mean, those 2 balls that he throws at the end, the first one where Slayton should have caught it and he just drops it, and then the second one where they wanted the Danny Johnson PI and they didn't get it because it wasn't PI. Like it's set hut 1, 2, 3, let it go. Like there's no hesitation. He launches that thing to the moon. Like his
yeah.
body position when he lets go of the football is like it's almost cartoonish in the way he's rocking back and letting the thing go with that much air under it. But it works. And sometimes
Yeah,
when you take deep shots, that's kind of what you got to do. And if you're risking an arm punt, you risk an arm punt. But like you let it go and you trust your guy to make a play. Let's wrap up the offense though real quick for Washington. Like, let's just go where you just were. The opportunities that get missed because of the protection. Like, how much bigger could this day have been for Heineke when it was already one of his biggest days, frankly, passing wise, yardage total wise of his career?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking about Daniel Jones and the
Oh,
Commanders'
okay.
defense, but I do think that there is an element of that. Like there's a very clear opportunity to Logan, which is affected by a little bit of pressure. Right? There's the pass to Jahan where he's hit as he's throwing it, which again would have been a huge play for sure. First down, probably an explosive play for the offense. And so again, like that's kind of the game you're playing every week, and every team plays it. Is like, how does the protection hold up long enough so I can get a shot out? And there were plays like that, which I thought were good to see. Right, the added play action stuff was something that I liked. I like to see that, but it's tough, man. It's tough to kind of walk that line and find those execution things. Um, but yeah, like a couple of the sacks, man. There's guys open, and you just can't get the ball out in time. So
Yeah. That's the NFL though.
yeah,
What about the running game? How did it ultimately grade out?
yeah, I think the running game is doing a nice job. I think they did a really good job with Dexter Lawrence. I think they did a good job attacking the edges, taking advantage of stuff. And Brian Robinson's just running like a horse. He's looking faster. He's kind of deceptively fast and making plays. And Gibson's getting in there making some touches. I'd like to see them kind of speak to Gibson's skill set a little bit better in terms of getting him on the perimeter, getting him into space. I think that's a very valuable piece there. But overall, I think you're very happy. I think, and then Curtis getting the touch late on that kind of trap play that they like to run with him was great. And
Yeah.
I think they do an excellent job, or they have done the last 2 weeks of again limiting the contact in the backfield, because usually you see the runners and it's like they're getting hit at the line of scrimmage and they're kind of muddle huddling it for an extra 5 yards or whatever it is. I think they've done a good job of getting guys covered up, getting runs targeted a little bit better. It's still not perfect, but it very rarely is. And so I think again, I think guys have really gravitated towards this, specifically the offensive line. They've gravitated towards blocking, run blocking. And if you ask any old lineman, they prefer that.
Yeah.
They offensive
Let me
linemen
go
want to
forward and
be.
strike someone instead of having them, going backwards and letting them run into me.
Yeah, like I don't think people understand like how challenging pass protection is. It is so hard. I've never met an offensive lineman that's like, "Oh man, I love pass protecting." It's not a thing. That you prefer run blocking. And so to get a game plan like this, a game structure like this, is something that Kyle really emphasizes. Like he's like, I only want to call 10 drop back passes in a game, which is nothing. You know what I mean? That's zero, for the NFL, like modern NFL. But that works. That works really well because it
It's
elevates
how
your
he
off.
just won with Brock Purdy.
Yeah, it elevates your offensive line. That's what you're doing. You elevate your offensive line, you elevate your quarterback, you create bigger throwing windows, all those different things. It does limit you in terms of some of the stuff you can do from a passing attack, but I'm okay with that because it elevates those other two things. So the running game has been really nice to see kind of mature and just become more efficient, I think. The other thing I wanted to point out is how this ball control style really can hurt you if you're in a game where you're behind. It really hurts you because there was that drive that they had after, I want to say, the Giants scored. I don't remember exactly. I think they scored in the third quarter.
Yeah, they scored
Wash,
early third quarter. I mean,
Washington
the
got the ball
Washington
back.
was down 20-13 for a long time in this game.
Yeah, they got the ball back. They went on a 6 play drive that went like 40 yards or something like that. 7 play drive that went 40 yards. I forget exactly. And it took 6.5 minutes off the clock because they're trying to kind of establish we're going to run the football, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And I get it, and that's who you are, but it's going to bite you in the butt if you got to score multiple points, multiple scores late in the game, because right now this offense is just not equipped from a philosophy standpoint to accommodate any type of quick score. So against a team like the 49ers, number one ranked defense in the NFL at the moment, right? Like that's going to be some tough sledding. You're going to have to find ways to kind of crack that nut. So interesting thing to keep an eye on moving forward.
I mean, here are some of the drives in the second half. These are impossible statistically, and they did it
No.
basically back to back. The Giants scored 5 plays, 20 yards, and 2:37. So they go up 20-13. The Commanders follow it with an 11-play, 38-yard drive that took 8 minutes. I can't make that up. 11
Yeah.
plays, 38 yards, 8 minutes. They then force a 3 and out for the Giants, and then they come back 12 plays, 40 yards, missed field goal, and 6-12.
Like, think
So
about
that's
those
that's
drives.
23 plays for 78 yards in 14 minutes and 12 seconds and 0 points.
And so that's gonna nip you in the butt if you're not careful. Like, you gotta be more efficient there. What was the play total on that for 73 yards? That's like 3 yards a
20
play?
23 plays for 78 yards.
Okay, 23 plays.
It's not good. It's basically 3 yards a play.
Yeah,
And then they go
3.39
8
yards a
plays.
play.
Then they go 8 plays, 90 yards, and 158 for the score. Um, by the way, let's put a pin in this for Friday as part of the
Mhm,
self scout. They need
okay,
to start mixing in some tempo. Not a
they do.
lot,
Yeah, a
not a
little bit.
lot, but there's a smart way that they can do it. I'm going to put my coaching hat on. The most dangerous thing we do on this podcast, but I want to get to that on Friday. Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulson. Make sure you're subscribed anywhere you're listening or watching right now for more from us. And Logan, the defense for the Commanders also had a very similar game. A lot to nitpick, but also they weren't that bad. And that's kind of
Right.
how you wind up in a tie kind of game. You've already mentioned earlier in the pod that it could have been a lot worse if the
Mhm.
defensive line didn't have the day that it had. What stands out on the tape from watching this defense?
Well, I think first off, just because it's like tooting our own horn, we knew that they were going to come in with some type of wrinkle, and the wrinkle in this one was we're going to on keepers, we were just going to block the defensive end and have Daniel Jones run to the perimeter. And that was something that I should have thought of, and I'm a little mad at myself I didn't think of, but it basically worked for like the first half of the game. And it worked twofold. One, it gave Daniel Jones easy throws. Two, it got Daniel Jones on the perimeter of the defense and let him run the football, which is something that I wasn't expecting, right? It basically turned into like this crazy like RPO on steroids, right? Fake run to the left, run the quarterback to the right. We've got deep concepts coming across, which is not something you normally get on RPO. Oh, it's not there. I'm going to scramble for 20 yards. I'm going to scramble for a 5-yard first down. Like, and that just became murderous. And obviously, I think Jack Del Rio in game did a good job of basically like looking at the defensive ends and says, if you get this down block by the tight end, you need to work vertical as hard and as fast as you can. And it worked out great. I think James Smith Williams gets a holding call. Montez Sweat gets kind of a holding call, something like that. And then F.A. Obata forces one to bubble really big. They're able to match the concepts because the coverage can catch up to the route. So they did adjust in game, but that was a really nice wrinkle by them. Also, the play action pass shots, I thought they did a great job of with, I'm talking about New York in terms of calling them and then protecting them for the most part. I will say Daniel Jones's first scramble where Ridgeway misses the sack, like Allen wins, and then kind of he's one on one with Ridgeway in a big space and he shakes Ridgeway, which is not like saying anything because Ridgeway is 335 pounds, so you should shake
Right.
him. But the post, so they run like a in on the front side and a post on the backside. The post is open by about 10 yards. So if he can set his feet and throw, like that's probably a touchdown, right? So again, getting Benjamin St. Juste back into this defense, the defensive line again elevating the back end was awesome. And then you saw again like what that those shots can do when he gets that ball completed to Slayton. Because really outside of that completion to Slayton, they didn't do anything super dynamic offensively. I think going into the fourth quarter, Daniel Jones was 17 of 18 for like 105 yards, and there was a 58-yard completion in there. So
Yeah.
obviously, he's basically like a super extension of the run game. And everyone mentioned Saquon Barkley. I actually think they did a really good job against Saquon outside of his touchdown run. A lot of his yardage came on that 2-minute drive where they're just spamming draws kind of repeatedly. And those are really hard to navigate in those situations. I do kind of wish after the first one, Jack would have been like, okay, they're probably going to run the draw again. Let's change our defensive front structure to accommodate in case they run a draw, and then we can contain the quarterback a little bit better. But that's again one of those nitpicking hindsight things that maybe in game you don't really think about. But I think overall, good against Saquon. And then obviously on the touchdown run, I think John Ridgeway gap releases and is able to create a nice A gap run. And Saquon's fast and he's physical, is able to finish for a touchdown. But overall, I'd say they did a good job, and the defense did a really cool thing. And I don't know how much I can talk about it because I pulled this is kind of a fun story. So today I pulled clips for Coach's Show, which we do on Friday. And I
Mhm.
pulled the clips and he approves them. And then I started kind of walking through them with Coach, and he says, "You know what, Logan? Like these clips are so good, you need to pick new clips because I don't want the Giants to see this." But basically, they had like this coverage disguise, right? They disguised this coverage, their cover three, and they were able to get to a different coverage off of this same coverage, and it screwed up Daniel Jones on 3 consecutive first downs and on third downs, which led to punts. So obviously, that coverage wrinkle by Jack to throw that in there was excellent, and it led to sacks, it led to hurries, it led to 2 sacks, and it led to a tackle for a loss actually. So really cool wrinkle by them to throw that in there, and so much so like that Ron is like guarding that thing with both hands. So really nice adjustment by them. Can't talk too much in detail about it, but that was cool. And then I think overall good job outside of the little wrinkle that they brought in from the keeper game early on.
Good job by you with your film study.
Yeah, it was. I mean,
Little too good.
little too good apparently. And he approved them, and then he saw me and said, "I actually don't approve these," which was a little bit of a runaround this morning. So
Yeah. On second thought,
yeah,
let's not because we played
let's
them
not
again
do
in
these.
2 weeks. I wonder if he would have just let it go if it wasn't the same opponent coming
Yeah,
up in
I
a couple
wonder.
weeks.
Yeah.
But who knows? The other thing that I think is interesting though, trying to make sense of, um, Jones didn't have an actual incompletion until that drive at the end of the game,
Right.
where he launched like his first real incompletion of the game is a drop by Darius Slayton because
It would have been a
monster
ga-
play, and it's a good
game-ending.
throw,
Yeah.
and yeah. His only other incompletion, they spiked the ball at the end of the first half,
Right.
which by the way, that play the play right before it sticks in my craw. And I know it's hard to stop someone when it's a 3rd and 1, but it's 3rd and 1 with about 26 seconds left. The Giants have no timeouts. They come out and run zone read, which of course they do because it's 3rd and 1, and that's what they do on 3rd and 1. And
Yep.
if you get the stop there, they have to fire drill the field goal team on you.
Yeah, that's true.
And instead, you give up you give up 2 yards, which is hard to get too mad about giving up 2 yards, but they give up the 2 yards, they spike it. It's Jones's only incompletion of the game until that final drive, and then they're able to waltz the field goal team on and kick. It's just kind of a bummer, I think, more than anything else, where it's like, ah, make
Yeah.
it hard on them. Make it hard on them situationally. And maybe you sell out a little bit. You have your whatever your zone read, stop, run blitz or whatever it is, call on there. Um, it just sucks in that situation. But I think ultimately the other thing that I'm trying to make sense of is the fact that he didn't have an incompletion. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, did you actually do a good job and you just forced him to throw the ball nowhere and it was complete and that's good, or is it bad that you literally did not cause an incompletion for nearly 4 quarters of football?
I mean, I think when you look at what they were doing from like a pass game standpoint, and I should have charted this, so I'm sorry for not being prepped for this, but I think of those 17, I think probably 10 of them were off of like keepers, like little flat routes,
Yeah.
right? Like just little dink and dunks, just an extension of the run game, really. Like, so in my mind, those should go in running statistics with his scrambles, right? Like that's essentially what
Right.
they were doing there, right? And then obviously he did some stuff. He had like a spot over the ball, which went for a first down. The touchdown, obviously, drop back. The shot play was a drop or a play action pass. But that to me is kind of that was their wrinkle. They knew they're not dumb, man. They know the strength of this team is defensive line. So what are ways you mitigate their effectiveness is stay out of drop back passing situations as much as you possibly can. And so that's what they did. And so one of the things you get out of that is you get easy throws, right? He's rolling out, easy throw, dink it down, call it, right? So, I think that's I don't know. They can't do it 2 weeks in a row because I think Jack will have a plan for it next time they do it. The defensive ends will be ready for it. But next time they play, what's the plan? And can they make Daniel Jones less efficient with their new plan defensively?
Yeah. It's so weird because, you say, "Oh, they did a good job on Barkley. They very limited the passing game, and yet they still somehow gave up 20 points, and
Well, I
wound up
think
in a
about it.
tie."
It's off of a short field, right? One that's
Right,
one
which
that
has
that's
been murder for them this year. Not that it's
yeah,
easy for anyone,
right.
but it feels like when they turn the ball over in their own end, it is a touchdown. They have
And that
not been
was
able to hold teams to field goals with any kind of regularity, which,
what was
that's why those are so bad.
what was the yard line? Like, where did the turnover happen? Do you remember?
I do not remember, but I
Yeah.
do have access to the internet, so I will look that up real quick. That
Yeah.
was the fumble at the end of the half. It was their own 20-yard line, so,
Yeah. That's a tough deal.
that's a tough
That's
deal.
That's a tough deal. And they, the other one they had against Philly earlier in the year was in a very similar spot on the field. So,
I believe they had one against Tennessee as well.
yeah, like those are tough situations to put your defense in. And like, it's just tough deal. It's a tough deal when that happens. And like, that's the only way you can cut it. You'd like him to make a play, but like my expectation as if I was the head coach, I'd be like, I want the defense to make a play. I want them to hold to a field goal, but I also am going to be
I would like
real and
Taylor
say,
Heinicke not to fumble.
yeah, I'm going
Although
to be
that
real.
wasn't really on him. He gets
Yeah.
pressure.
Gets
But
pressure again, and we could talk about that too, like how, there was this offensive strategy of like kind of getting into empty, and then they were in heavy or max protecting in certain situations. And one of the things, again, I think we talked about this a little bit on the post game pod. This is going back to offense. Sorry, I should have
that's
brought this up before.
if you're
The
listening to the shortened versions of the podcast, this is the kind of stuff you could get if you listen to the full thing. Boom.
is that the they went max protection, so they left, tight end and back end. And Wink Martindale did a great job of saying, like, okay, yeah, stay in max protection. I'm going to show that you have to call your slide to the left away from the tight end. And then you end up, everyone goes to the left. He dropped everybody out. He did this twice. And then the tight end is one on one with the best pass rusher on the field in Azeez Ojulari. And I think tight ends are great. I'm a tight end myself. I will tell you this, that is a mismatch in favor of the New York Giants, and they were able to capitalize on that multiple times. And that's the problem with going max protection is you expose pass protectors who are not, that's not their full-time gig, to really good pass rushers. And that's kind of the dice you roll in those situations.
Yeah. Anything else from the game that we wanted to hit? Obviously, we'll get into some more of this Friday as we get into the self scout, if you will, our self scout through 14 weeks, and a lot of this most recent game will be relevant. But anything else that from watching the tape you wanted to point out real quick?
I think those are all kind of the major things. I'm trying to think if there's anything that pops out. Wes Schweitzer looked good coming back, after not playing for a while, which is nice, especially with Cosme, who looked solid early on, getting hurt. Larson being out is a big deal. I think he's going to miss the rest of the year, from what I understand. So, not ideal. Again, kind of that musical chairs on the offensive line is something that's always tough to negotiate. Um, yeah, I think that's probably it. What did you think of the overtime? I wanted to ask you about that. Overtime clock management. Anything that stood out to you there?
I they got killed by some penalties at some really bad spots. And one of them, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, was on the punt. Actually, no, it
Uh,
wasn't overtime. That was end of regulation.
yeah,
They should have had the ball somewhere up near. Yeah, there's a penalty on Percy Butler for the block out of bounds. Um,
that's
it
personal
should have
foul.
been, yeah, and it's a 12-yard return by Erickson to the 36. If you're on the 36 with 128 to go and all 3 timeouts, that I would say your chances of winning are pretty good to get into
Yeah,
field goal range, especially
yeah,
with the kind of leg that Sly has. Instead, they have a 15-yard penalty and they get knocked back all the way to the 24-yard, or sorry, it's half the distance from the Washington 24. So they start at their own 12.
yeah.
At that point, you're not in good shape. And obviously, you get not very far with that. Ultimately, a couple of incompletions leads to you punting the ball back with the Giants.
That was the sack, right? They
In
took a sack there. That was the sack by
uh
Thibodeau, right?
no,
Thibodeau.
that was in overtime. These drives
Okay.
started to melt together in my brain too, which
Yeah,
is
me
why I
too.
actually thought that was the same drive. But no, that was their first drive in overtime, or sorry, their last drive in overtime. They get the ball back at their own 10 after a fair catch by Erickson, which
Okay.
is the right call.
Yeah.
Um, I'd say there's like 2 things at the end of overtime too that drove me nuts. One, they don't have a kick returner back. Like, fine, whatever, but like if you got a 1% chance to win and there's no harm in doing it, why not increase your chances of winning by 1%? The other one that actually is a bigger deal, the situational awareness to not to give up like the 5, 6, 7 yard, whatever it was, quick out on 2 snaps before the field goal. Jones has to throw it out of bounds on the snap right before, but they give up like an extra 7 yards
Yeah.
there. And considering the field goal missed by inches, a foot, a yard, like, why are you giving? They need a 7 yard out. They don't have time to throw good deeper down the field. Like, you need to be playing like literally the shell. on the outside. Why? And by the way, I also don't get why teams don't press man in that situation or like press coverage in that situation. You are fighting the clock. Make them eat as much clock as possible. Make it so that they have to throw the ball out of bounds multiple times. Do not let them into field goal range. Keep them at the 64-yarder or whatever it was at for Gano. It works out because he misses from 57, but like he would have been way short at
Yeah.
63. So, I mean, I can look up and see how much yardage they gain, but it's like those little details at the end of games matter a lot. And they're able to get, I mean, it was only 3 yards even for Bellinger. It
That's
was
a
less
big
than I
deal,
thought.
though.
But like when you're at the 43-yard line, that's the difference between 60 and 57.
Yeah.
And I would much rather see that field goal taken from 60 than 57.
I agree. I think I don't think you press man there because you're worried about a penalty. You're worried about like a holding call, which would give them 5, and then if it's an offensive PI,
Sure.
it's 15.
All right,
or
fine.
whatever
Press
the hell.
bail. Like
Yeah,
have someone
whatever.
in their
Yeah.
face at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. Do they have any timeouts? And how much time was
And
left on the clock? How much time was left on the clock?
You had 15 seconds, and I do not believe they had any timeouts.
So I bet you there's a little bit of concern about Jones scrambling in that situation. I know 15 seconds doesn't seem like enough time to scramble, but if I remember correctly, the formula is if the quarterback can run with more than 14 seconds on the clock, because you can get reset and spike in under 14 seconds. So again, like you have to kind of play a normal defensive structure as opposed to the fence, because you need somebody in the middle of the field to kind of say, hey, Daniel Jones, like stay where you are. It would be my only thought. And again, like I do agree that that's not ideal. You don't want to give up yards in that situation. You don't want to make that any easier than it needs to be. But I'm just trying to play devil's advocate a little bit and think about why you would do that. And that would be my conclusion, is that you're worried about him running around a little bit.
I have a new fence design. They should play someone like basically like if you want to throw the 3 yard, you're going to throw it right to my guy, and also
Yeah.
my guy is now in position for you
To like
to
tackle.
prevent scrambles.
Yeah.
There, I did. I just invented new end of game defense.
You did it.
This is why you stay for the end of the pod. All right. Subscribe wherever you're listening or watching right now. We appreciate you doing so. We'll be back Friday with a big self-scout edition, and then we might just open up the Zoom, if you will. This is not actually on Zoom. Open up the StreamYard. We'll give them a shout out. We'll open up the StreamYard perhaps next week and let some folks ask questions, quote unquote, in person. So stay tuned for details on that if we do indeed go that route. If not, we'll just do a traditional mailbag to get going next week. Until then, we'll see you Friday. Thanks for listening or watching. Take command. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening right now, because obviously, if you're listening there, our podcast is available, and then you can subscribe there, and then you can have it anytime we put out a new episode.
Anytime you want it. And it helps us out, guys. Help us out. Help us help you.
If you don't want to do it for your own listening good, do it for us. Be altruistic, or whatever that version is.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good word.
I don't know if I use it properly, but we're just gonna roll with it. What do you say? UCLA education?
I think that's right. Be altruistic.
I think it was too.
Yeah.